Welcome to Geared for Growth. I'm your host, Mike Mortlock from MCG Quantity Surveyors. Now, today we have more property data than at any other point in history, yet investors are arguably more confused than ever. Today on Geared for Growth, I'm joined by Jo Agresta from Abodey. She's been a buyer's agent, a selling agent, she's a PropTech founder, and she sees exactly where investors go wrong. We dig into why real estate platforms aren't built for buyers, why hotspot lists rarely help, and how AI is changing property decisions for better and worse. It's an awesome interview with Jo, and we unpack a lot of key concepts. I'm sure everyone's going to get something out of this. Here's Jo. Jo Agresta, thanks for joining me on Geared for Growth.
Oh, thank you for having me, Mike. Been looking forward to it. We had a nice long chat when we met up, so I know that we're not going to disappoint today.
Well, let's hope not. The interview is young, but if we do mess it up, it'll be my fault, not yours. Let's start with you. For people who maybe haven't come across you or your work yet, can you give us a bit of a quick snapshot of your background, especially with property, and what led you to building Abodey?
Yeah, for sure. My career started back in 2010, so finished high school and went straight into real estate. I went to become a real estate agent. So I got my license, stayed in the game working at Century 21 and Ray White over a 6-7 year period. And I was selling houses back then. And if you remember the 2010s, you'll remember that GFC just happened. It was a pretty crap market. It was a very big test to be an agent in that time frame. But I just fell in love with property. I fell in love with people and how the industry works. But I saw a lot of inconsistencies in the sense of like, okay, well, I'm representing sellers and people, wanting to sell their properties, but I've always felt a lot of sympathy for the buyers that I was dealing with. So before I actually went into buyers advocacy, that came later, I ended up in insurance. I did corporate for about 8 years. And towards the last 4 years of my tenure there, I went into buyers advocacy part-time, started doing my own podcast with Abodey, doing the No BS podcast, talking about how do you buy a house without all the headaches. And then it just really started on a slope of, no, I want to represent the buyer. There's so many problems in the buying space. No one was really tackling it or addressing it. Buyers agents weren't as common around that time, like 5 years ago. And now we've fast forward to this year, we're like, 6-7% of the nation's buying with an advocate, which was massive growth over the last few years. So that's really where I started. And Abodey really came from building a property. I wanted to use technology and property in the same sentence. And the inconsistencies I saw, I did a survey back then using Facebook Marketplace in COVID, using every medium I could to get a reply. And just asking people who had bought property, who were on the market, what were the problems. And it boiled down to they wanted checklists, they wanted data, they didn't know where to look, they didn't know who to talk to. So I thought, well, can I build a piece of technology like a mobile app that can tell someone the right area to invest in, the right properties to look at, give them all the data that agents typically get access to that they wouldn't without a paywall, and then telling them who they can connect with in terms of professionals and giving them all those tools and access in the palm of their hand so they can match properties, connect with professionals and buy a house in, 6 weeks, which is the average for an advocate. So that's really where the journey's taken me.
So tell us what the gap is between the consumer data and what is actually available to real estate agents, because it does sort of seem with realestate.com, there's so many metrics and things that you can see now, but there are still some industry tools that the agents keep close to their chest, right?
Well, this is the big thing that I always say. The sooner the buyers or the investors of the world realise that realestate.com is a massive engine, it's marketing. They are there. If you needed to use that engine and it was for buyers to have the information and the data that you need to make decisions, do you really think that the platform would be free? It can't be free.
Well, all that buyers don't pay a cent, do they?
No, and this is what I've been trying to kind of get that messaging across with consumers, because when you go on realestate.com, you're being marketed to. The properties are presented usually, or the agent tries to, in the best possible light. They're not telling you of issues that are wrong with the property, the zoning problems, if there's any caveats, issues on the land, what the rental yields are. All of those things are presented, but they're not really presented for problems. They're presented for the best possible light. So you're always going to see the opportunity as a great option when you're coming across these houses until you start then doing the digging on other platforms and other websites and trying to make sense of it. And this is where I think a lot of investors either get overwhelmed and fed up, or they end up with an advocate, or they just end up buying something that they trust publicly available data. And you've got to really know where to look.
Yeah, and I suppose back to that point, there's more data available really than ever, yet it does still seem clear that people are still making poor decisions. Why do you think that the prevalence of this extra data hasn't necessarily led to better outcomes for the buyers? And maybe it's way better outcomes for the vendors and the selling agents, but not the buyers, right?
Oh, 100%. It goes back to my point of being, realestate.com, they're not a bad platform, they exist, but they are paid by real estate agents to advertise and market properties. So realestate.com don't have a vested interest in making sure the buyers got buyer beware, right? Their vested interest is making sure that their customers are happy. Their customers are agents and are, land and developers, people who have stock to advertise. So I think although there's a lot of data available, it doesn't necessarily mean that the data always makes sense or that it's telling a story that's applicable for a buyer. It's always going to be a little bit more skewed to the vendor side. And being in the game, we're partnered with PropTech, who is actually owned by realestate.com. And we get all our data, all of the background data from them. And it's interesting to see some of the data points you can't display and you can't talk about, even in those agreements. And I find that it's protected for a reason, listing prices and information.
So say that again. You can't share it, but you also can't even talk about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of...
That's ruined this segment.
No, we absolutely can talk about the data we get from PropTech, but there's a few data points specifically that can't be publicly displayed to consumers. It's reserved for those agents and it's reserved for the people who basically hold a license and are selling properties.
Yep.
And that's what makes it very interesting, because some of those data points, like listing prices that are being put up in the back end by agents of what the price actually is for the property and what it will actually sell for, is very protected. You can't just publicly list that information.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing in and of itself. And I noticed that there's a similarity between Seek and realestate.com. For example, if there's a salary that you're putting a job up to, you have to put a number, but you might sort of say, 80 to 100 grand based on experience, or, like a generous package for the right person. Or if it's a property, it might be for auction. There has to be something put in there, or maybe it's one of those buyer inquiry ranges where they sort of say it's 1 to 1.3, but in the back end, there will be an answer that's put in there. Now, whether that is sort of gamified by the selling agent or not, you won't necessarily understand, but it's still a valuable insight, right?
Oh, it's so valuable. Like, I think one of the biggest insights that I would love, and I understand why they protect it. Like, I totally get the methodology behind it, because these are people that are paying realestate.com to sell their properties, right? So they don't want all the data exposed. They don't want all the information out there to sway someone's decision not to buy their home. So they need to have an advertised price. Now, in Victoria, that's very protected now. So they've tried to put in a lot of laws to, you've got to display the listing price. You can't make an offer, you can't have all that stuff. The other states like New South Wales definitely still does that, make an offer. They don't display a price at all. Victoria's done one thing right, that every listing that you look up on realestate.com now has a price. And then they've layered that with, now when you go to auction and you put up a property for auction, a week before the auction goes, the agent has to put up the reserve price on realestate.com. So what I actually went to an auction to film some content. This is end of last year. And consumers, came, said to me, are you bidding? I'm like, no, I'm just observing, filming some content. I do a real estate podcast. And they said to me, why did the price change? Do you know why it changed? And I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, I looked at this property. It was in our budget, 2 weeks ago. And then I came, looked at the listing to get the address to come here this weekend, and the price has gone up significantly. It was like 50 grand more. And I said, yeah, because they have to display the reserve price now. And they had already paid for a building and pest. They had already paid for a conveyancer review, and they were outpriced before the auction started.
Yeah,
So
and
it's
that raises an interesting point, right? Because there'd be some people sort of saying, well, this person has a fiduciary responsibility to maximize the sale price for the vendor. So whatever they do is fair game. However, there are real costs for buyers like the pest and building and maybe surveys or it could be strata reports, those sorts of things. And if people are kind of lured into a situation where they might be spending $1,000 on pre-purchase reports, it doesn't speak to fairness in my view.
No, it doesn't. And there's a lot of people that don't do the due diligence, right? There's two camps. There's people who don't know what they don't know. And that's fair. You're not taught how to buy property. You're not an advocate. You don't know these steps. So you don't do the due diligence and you get caught out with cost and repairs and issues post-purchase once you start going to a conveyancer or a property lawyer. And then you find out after you've made your offer that there's issues. On the other side, if you don't pay to do your due diligence, even if you miss out on the property, then it's a catch-22 either way. It's like, well, you either spend the money and then you win the property and it's happy days, you've done all your checks, you know what you're buying, or you take the risk, don't do those checks, but now you're committed to the purchase because you've won the bid or you've actually written a contract and you can't get out of it. So it's a catch-22 for consumers. I always err on the side of how long have you been on market? How much money are you spending in petrol? How many times are you travelling? Is it worth considering a buyer's advocate at this point that knows the market better, is not going to keep you, like buyer's agents don't want to keep you on market for more than 2 months. You know, that's a bad service, right? Because it's like, why can't they find the property with the right metrics that's going to do what it needs to do for you, whether that's owner occupancy or investing. So
Yeah.
it's
And they're not
it's
on an
hard.
hourly rate either, right? So efficiency impacts their bottom line.
That's right. And a lot of them do like a no fee, no pay, or kind of deals. I don't really like those, but because they do a lot of work in the lead up to that moment of purchasing. So it's like you pay for the due diligence, they do the research, they go out on the
Yep.
field, they find the properties, they negotiate. You pay it usually either in stages, like could be 30% up front and then the remainder at unconditional. All agents work different, but
Yep.
I always say you're better off getting a professional who has the connections, who can pull favours and pull strings with their professionals. Like I know when I was an advocate full time, I had conveyancers, that I always partnered with that I would work with and say, look, I'm at an auction on Saturday. It's 3 days before auction. Can you do a quick review for me? And they won't charge me for it. They'll go, yep, yeah, send me the contract. And my clients haven't had to pay for that fee for service. So there's a few
Yep.
perks that buyers advocates can pull on to make sure that a deal's clean and done right without costing you even more money.
Yeah, I mean, I've always sort of said just based on the repetition alone, you're building that trade craft and then the relationships and the negotiating skills and the intimate property knowledge. Like a good advocate is worth, what they're getting paid, right?
100% every time.
So with Abodey, is that something that is accessible to the end consumer, or is it something that you built to help buyers agents to leverage the data and help to transact?
Great question. We do both sides of the market. So when we launched at the end of 2024 in December, we launched the mobile app to consumers, and that's really targeting owner-occupier home buyers. So I felt like they were the first step that needed the most assistance of where to buy, what to buy. So we developed this algorithm that you put in your lifestyle preferences, your budget preferences, your property preferences, and then what our algorithm does is scans the market in the given locations that you're after, and it will pick the top 5 really well-suited properties. And then the AI gives you context and data behind it. So it'll say, you said you have a dog and you've got 2 kids, and one of the deal breakers was that you need to be within 5 kilometres of a freeway entrance because you work in CBD. Our AI will actually come back and say, well, this property is good because it's 500 metres from a dog park. The entrance to the freeway is 1 kilometre away. And it gives you all this personalisation. So that's the consumer side. And then we connect them with the professionals. They can choose who they want to work with in the app. And that's a mobile app on iOS as well as Android. And then on the other side, this is more start of last year in 2025. After we launched, we actually had 30% of the downloads were professionals. They were buyers agents, mortgage brokers, and real estate agents. And I'm like, wonder what they want to do. So I surveyed those guys and they just said, look, the tech's really cool, but we also help consumers. How do we get access to the data and reports you produce for our customers? And that's where we developed Abodey Pro. So now we have a professional login where professionals, whether you're a broker, buyer's agent, whatever part of the industry you touch in real estate, can log in and then start generating buyer briefs and buyer reports, and then they can share them with their customers. And we've had a really good uptake with that side of the business.
Awesome. Well, we are geared for growth as a show name, so there's definitely an investor buyer. So I wanted to kind of ask you, with what you're sort of seeing on the ground, with your real estate sales and advocacy experience, and of course, I presume you have lots of conversations with people on the Abodey platform. What do you think are some of the biggest mistakes that everyday investors are making when they're selecting suburbs or even drilling down to the individual property?
I think the biggest thing is chasing the hype or the property bros on your social media who talk about the hotspot suburbs. I kind of dislike the terminology hotspot because as soon as you start talking about a hotspot, right, the characteristics are usually high rental yields and growth metrics. Sales and over a certain 3 to 6 month period have been consistently high, and it's not always that you can buy in that market now. If it's a hotspot, it means people have been buying there for 6 months, flat out. It's competitive now. So you need to kind of go a step backwards and start looking at those suburbs that are going to show signs of that same growth and compare those stats. So like if we take in Victoria, Bendigo has had huge growth. You can buy properties in Bendigo right now for 550, 600,000, full houses with, 700 metre square of land and decent block sizes. But then when you compare another market that's lower socioeconomic, right, we go to Morwell in Victoria, and I apologise for the Victoria references, right, but if we go to Victoria in Morwell, it's a very poorly kind of represented suburb from a socioeconomic score, I think is like 2. And when you look at that, you look at the house prices and what you can get. Under 300,000, 3-bed, 2-bath, 2-car houses, 700 to 900 metre square land sizes. These are starting to show signs of green shoots. When I looked at how much growth had happened, like I looked at the data this morning, 17% over 3 months, it's grown. That area in terms of purchasing. That's now starting to become a market that's hotter and it's heating up. People are going to keep buying there. That's going to become that next Bendigo, potentially. So I feel like you need to look for signs of life before the hotspot term is starting to be used.
Yeah, I did want to sort of ask you about how you talk about understanding why a location makes sense rather than what is popular. And it sort of seems to me that it's all a matter of timing. So for a property to be in the national media as a hotspot, that is a time differential from the first green shoots that we can see. And really the best time to buy is pre-green shoots if you can, right? Because of just the data lag, right? So by the time you're seeing green shoots, you've actually already seen a number of transactions in that market. Is that fair, or is there more meat on the bones there?
No, I think that's fair to say, because when you compare, like if I looked at a brief, right, and someone says, look, I've got a budget of 500,000-600,000, I want to buy an investment. Ideally, I want to keep it to the lower side of that 500,000 or less. What I'm looking for is, okay, which markets can I play in? That's step one. And I knock 20% off that top price, even lower, because whatever's been advertised on the market, let's say it's advertised at 500. I know that that's probably asking for 550 to 600. They're not asking for 500. So I'm now dropping my even lower. I'm going to like that 450, 480 mark so I can buy something at that 500,000 point. That's one thing. I need to eliminate what markets are going to accept offers in that realm to play with my client's budget. That's the first thing. Now that I've got those suburbs based on where I can play, then I have to look at what's actually moving and what's not moving. Why hasn't it moved? What's it been doing over 6 months? What's it been doing over 12 months and over 5 to 10 year periods? And just seeing if the growth stacks up. Because as we know, Australian property over 100 years, the trajectory is always up. It's never going down. There's periods of where there's lapses and there's, down periods. But as a whole, as a country, it's always kind of scaled up, right? And that's why everyone says invest in property, because in the history of property, you either hold it or you sell it at the right time and you'll make money either way. So my kind of thinking is you have to play with your budget and you've got to play with what you want that property strategy to do for you. That's like if you want an Airbnb, I wouldn't recommend investing in Morwell because it's cheap, right? It's like, well, no one's going to Airbnb in Morwell. Sorry, it's just, I'd be very shocked. Like, unless that's a truckie or someone passing through, that's not going to be your most popular destination. So you are playing in a market that's going to have to appeal to that Airbnb, somewhere CBD or beachside or peninsula side, that's going to have that mass appeal of people wanting to stay there 12 months rotating, right, for short-term stays. If that's your strategy. If that's not your strategy and you want to hold a property for 10 years, 20 years and just have it sit there and grow and you want to make decisions later, you need to pick, well, what market's going to do that? That's a green shoots market, in my opinion. You can see that growth. You can see where it's going. If you want to make money in 2 years, sell it. That's a different strategy again. So you've got to get really clear on your goals from day one. Like, you've got to know what you're chasing. You don't just buy investment with no real strategy behind it. That's where you get caught in traps, bad investments, and then you panic into, I'm not making enough money on the rental. I'm not making enough money from this deal. Now I'm stuck and I don't know how to manage it.
Well, there's strategy around, okay, well, what am I actually trying to achieve? I want X passive income by this age, or I want to retire at this age, and all that sort of stuff. And that's probably the topic of a completely different show. But when it comes to sort of data strategy, it kind of used to be like in the back of the property mag, it would be like, these are the top suburbs, and then because of price segmentation, there's a couple of waterfronts that sell, and then suddenly the growth is 200%. So there's all sorts of problems with that. Of course, the traditional media is not necessarily a great source of truth, not necessarily being a conspiracy theorist, but they're more interested in whether a Hemsworth lives there than the actual robust data. But
So
if we fast forward to today, we do actually have quite a lot of tech that enables us to do the suburb matching. How have you sort of seen that evolution in the property space, and how do you rate those traditional suburb matching tools that we have access to today?
The Geared for Growth Property Investing podcast is presented by our business, MCG Quantity Surveyors. If you're an investor or a property professional looking to get the best tax depreciation deductions for yourself or your clients, please get in touch with us at mcgqs.com.au. It's our mission to help as many property investors as we can to maximise their claims and maximise their property education as well.
Look, I feel like we've still got a little bit of ways to go. Part of what we're doing at Abodey is building that tool at the moment, suburb matching, because I'm quite, what I've seen a gap in, I'll explain what's in market at the moment and why it's kind of working but not. When you look at the really big data points for suburbs, we always go to rental yield, we go to sales performance, and we go to like the median average price, right, of that market. If that's, you've got to understand what those models are measuring against and why they're recommending them to you. Is it purely based on data and metrics? Because that's not always correct, in the sense that it goes back to strategy. If your strategy is Airbnb and they're telling you the best market to invest in is, you know, in Morwell or any of these country suburbs, you're basing that off the wrong data points. It's not really a strategy it's not the right suburb for what you're trying to achieve. So where I think these tools are missing something is you need to be able to input your strategy behind it and say, well, what is the strategy here? Oh, I want to actually do this for short-term investment. I want to do a renovation and I want a property that I can purchase and add value to. I have another 100,000 to spend on renos, so I want to add a bathroom or I want to add a bedroom to it. If you can upload that strategy, then it changes what kind of suburbs you recommend. So it's all in the algorithm of, well, how do you design what signs of life to look for in those markets, where that's going to perform best. And that's where I feel like the current tools are missing that really important piece. Because anything can recommend. You can go to realestate.com now and you can go to any of the search platforms and type in a suburb, look up the metrics and even ABS and see all the data and go, yeah, cool, these all look like good choices. I'll invest. If it's not aiding the strategy, that's the missing piece for me. And that's what that's what we'll be releasing this year. We've been building that quietly in the background, but it's not quite ready yet.
Yeah, good. Yeah. I mean, that'll be very interesting to see. And I completely agree. I mean, people are sick of me saying the little catchphrase of, I always kind of think about it having dessert as a kid. You can have your dessert, but you've got to eat your veggies first. And the veggies is the strategy, right? But the hotspots are more exciting. That's why I think they're the dessert. It's like, oh, I'd love to eat my dessert first because that's the exciting stuff. And you get there eventually, right? But unless you put that strategy piece in stealth, in place, you're dying of malnutrition before you finish your dessert. I don't know. I need to workshop this analogy.
No, don't change it. It's absolutely killer. It's true because it is the dessert, right? Like you hear when something hits the media or the mass media and national media starts reporting on these suburbs, you got to think that by the time this news gets to the media like to see performance over a long period. So they need to see that this, before they even report on the fact that this is a hot suburb, it's probably had 12 months of being a hot suburb by the time they report on it. So when they're reporting it, they're now attracting a mass audience to go, oh, well, I didn't even know that, that suburb was doing well. I better go have a look. And they're driving that kind of attention to that suburb when it's already overcapitalised. There's already a heap of competition. You've kind of missed out. You need to be back at step one with green shoots, like we were talking about earlier.
Yes. And I can't help but feel like no one's ever really talked about it, but there is obviously some baked in pump and dump style strategies where you get some of these big volume buyers agents sort of saying, let's just say Bendigo is the next hotspot, but they might have already transacted 200 Bendigo properties with their own clients before they release it. And then the media goes, oh, this, industry guru was talking about this. So it actually almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy with some of these big buyers agency businesses that sort of didn't exist 10 years ago. Like it was very unusual to have a buyers agency business, in my view, of more than 5 or 10 employees. But now we're probably talking 50 to 100 employees in some of them.
It's crazy. I don't have a big belief system, like not saying that they don't work or they don't have a strategy, but they tend to stick to whatever their proven method is. It's very much like a formula that they've created to find these properties or these suburbs, and they stick to that methodology and they kind of rinse and repeat it with the next suburb or the next, option. Where I have an issue with that is it's not really tailored to you, it's tailored for volume. So they need to be able to work with 100 buyers per year at volume. Now, you can't do that as a small buyers advocacy. If you came to me as an advocate back then, I could only manage maybe 2 to 3 people a month. 3 was pushing it. 2 buyers a month was enough for my workload, because I can't then do a good job. And you'll find a lot of smaller advocacies really tailor strategies, really tailor approaches. Like the other thing is when you come across these some buyers agents who say they're the jack of all trades, right? They can say, oh, I do all strategies, so we just tailor it to you. I have a fundamental issue with that because our industry is full of niches. Like for me, yeah, I could absolutely, like I specialise in owner-occupiers, right? I love owner-occupiers. I love the feelings of new homes and like your first home and your starter homes. So that was my area of expertise, right? I helped these people find the right properties that suited lifestyle choices, that suited, downsizing and upsizing. When I came across someone who was buying for investment and they had a really specific way they wanted to go about it, of course I can apply my knowledge and help them out. Or am I in a better position to refer them to some other buyer's agent that I'm partnered with and say, you know what, I actually have an advocate over here. They're fantastic. They specialise in renovations. I think you should have a chat to them and they will help you out with a price because we're partnered. And that's how I would kind of operate.
Yeah, and I wish more people took that approach. I don't think that's necessarily happening enough because it's sort of foregoing revenue, and a lot of these businesses do seem to be more focused on that, on the revenue side of things.
It's terrible. Like, I think this is where we're coming into an age where buyers advocacy prior to 5 years ago was very little, like less than 1% of houses were purchased. I think it was 2021. Less than 1% were purchased through a buyer's agent back then. We're now going to 6% of those properties are being purchased through a buyer's agent. It's becoming more common. I think shows like Selling Sunset and all of those US shows that actually really paint the picture of an advocate are starting to make it more popular here. And I think where we're going to see some cracks in the paint is you're going to have to start doing better due diligence on who your buyer's agent is and their experience and what they can actually do and how they approach those strategies for you, because it's kind of like, real estate agents have their reputation, that whether that's, being given to them by the public and how they deal with things, we're going to start to have to pick out the bad buyers agents, and they're already in market. I've seen a whole heap of them that I don't work with, I won't have on my show, I don't agree with the methodology, all these machines that build up. There's a lot of courses you can do. Become a buyer's agent, earn 6 figures. It's the wrong messaging, wrong people to get into the industry.
Yes, and probably a whole nother show on that topic as well. Although actually the previous show, we talked about how to actually interview a buyer's agent and gave sort of 15 question examples as a bit of a handout of like, they better have good answers to these ones. But yeah, absolutely important. When we sort of had a chat late last year, we were talking about some research that we did on ChatGPT's ability to pick suburbs, and then split it into a deep sort of research mode where we gave it more data, and believe it or not, it actually became worse the more information that it was given. I'm interested in your thought of the state of play right now, because AI is obviously a huge buzzword. I think people misunderstand the difference between AI and large language model. Where do you think AI is genuinely helpful today in cutting through the noise and the bias, and where do you think its limitations lie?
So ChatGPT, I'll give you a perfect example. The algorithm that we've built uses AI, ChatGPT, as a base model, right, in the background, so OpenAI. Now, without context, if I didn't give that engine data sources that are verified, so when I say data sources, we pay to partner with, realestate.com's data set through PropTech, right? So that's for all our property listings and all our data metrics. We partner with Landchecker, same thing. We get their premium property reports for zoning, limitations, building, flood zones, bushfire. Partnered with all these proper data providers. When the data source is the correct source of truth, right, and you're playing with the people that are verified in the space, and you feed that into an AI language model or an engine, then it's all about the prompting, and it's all about the engineering of, well, how does that contextualize it? So where I see a ChatGPT, that should be used to give you context and to explain complex data points in a way that you're going to get it before you make a decision. So that's why we've built the engine the way we have. It's very important to have context. I can show you data on a piece of paper. Unless you're a property analyst, unless you're a buyer's advocate or a real estate agent or someone who understands how to read these data points, you're not going to be able to make sense of it. You're going to go, well, I think from what ChatGPT said, I should look at a 4% rental yield. Should you? Is that correct? How do you know that that's the golden number? Because a computer told you based on all of its knowledge set. Where does that knowledge come from? It's open. That's
a really interesting one, yeah. Because when we did it, we uncovered a rather large yield bias, and that wasn't really given in the context. And you don't really get to see behind the curtain of, if you're giving it 100 data points, it's assigning weighting to them based on some ethereal knowledge that it's gleaned from the internet, or I don't think that OpenAI has a team of property experts to make sure the property prompts are reasonable, right?
No, not at all. And this is why we spent 5 years before we actually released our model, because the amount of prompting we had to go through and engineering of, it's mathematics. What it is simple mathematics in our engine, right? It's a series of formulas that we've said, okay, well, show me all these data points. When you come across rental yield at 4 to 5%, I would say that that's a good indicator. But if you see the vacancy rate, at 0.1%, now I'm a bit concerned. All right, so you have to almost cancel these data points against each other and go, okay, well, if this says this, then that becomes not as attractive. Make that a consideration. So the way our engine works is it takes all those data points based on a series of formulas, and then when it gives you a result, without all the jargon, it's saying to you, hey, this is a good investment because of X, Y, Z. Here's where I have concerns. It doesn't have this. The data doesn't stack up here. If you wanted to invest, you would probably have to hold this property for X amount of years. And again, this is just our engine trying to give you an idea, because the biggest problem people have in property, whether you're investing for investment properties or, capital growth, or you're investing for owner occupancy, is your speed of decision making. Sometimes you just need the data presented to you in a really clean format in language that you understand, so you can quickly eliminate properties and go, oh, cool, I understand what it's telling me. I understand that data. I understand the context. Okay, I don't like that property. I'm going to move on to the next one. That's where a lot of people sit on market for 12 months. They can't make those decisions quickly because you're not expected to know how to understand and interpret it. But society says you should.
Yeah. But the reality is that it's an extremely complex skill that very few people in Australia I would confidently say have mastered. Right? We talked a little bit about the strategy and giving sort of the context of what you're trying to achieve being so important before you go and do the hotspotting or use AI. One thing I wanted to get your sort of points on is that when it comes to data, I feel like there is a huge limitation in what data is actually available, even from the big data houses. And I've witnessed a few people just sort of live getting questions and going, oh, like let's just say Morwell. Well, let's just have a look at the data. And it's looking at, real-time inventory, and it might look at 10-year growth records. But it seems to me that it has a great ability to predict what is going to happen in the next 3 months. But in terms of the next 10 to 30 years, it's kind of in the dark. And when I speak to people who are practitioners in this space and hear that they go and they interview the local mayor and they say, oh, well, like we haven't released this yet, but we've got a new DCP that's outlining this land rezoning, and we've actually got, federal funding for a rail link that's going to link all these sorts of things. That data doesn't actually exist. So I'm wondering, like, what part does data have to play for the people that aren't looking for a short-term investment or a value add? Because there's different goalposts there. But for the set and forget long-term investor that for a long time we've been taught that we all should be, how do you sort of rate what's available?
It's not as good as what it could be, right? Like, I think with AI, we should be looking at predictable analytics, like predictive future state. Based on all the available data, you can draw conclusions. We don't use real estate data the way we probably should. I don't think there's a lot of businesses or a lot of data providers that have really cracked the code on insight just yet. And that's because it's easy to show you data points and it's easy to show you what's happening. It is another thing with liability and lawsuits to have a predictable model that's going to say to you, you should buy here because you will make money by 2030 of 30,000 or 200,000 plus. To put your weight behind that kind of data point, no one's going to do it. It's way too risky because the liability behind it will just come to bite you unless you've got a really kick-ass lawyer that's going to protect every possible clause. And I think a lot of advocates and people who do that kind of, even advocates, right? Like, I'll give you an example. When you have a client, we always look at their portfolio performance over, 6 months later, 12 months later, and we give them an update. And that's what I used to do anyway. That's what a lot of advocates should do. And it's really about, look, I've bought this with probably 2-year projections in mind. Let's see where it's at in 2 years. And let's see how much growth there is. And then let's see what the market's doing. I think it's more going to be about your due diligence on reviewing your stats the best you can every single year, getting depreciation schedules and seeing exactly where you sit to know how are you performing. Because a lot of people do buy those properties and then they don't do the maintenance of that. Well, where's the data stacking up year on year? Are you performing or are you not? And then what levers can you pull to make it continue performing, or is it a time to sell, or is it a time to hold? Is there a rent rise that you need to put in? Is there something else that you can do to make this more attractive? Maybe a renovation, who knows? So I think it's more about predictive analytics would be a wonderful thing. I don't think many people will dabble into it because it's going to open up too many wounds. I know there's companies doing it. I know that there's companies trying to work on it, but they're coming into those barriers with liability. Like, how do you confidently predict? Like, no one predicted COVID. That's the biggest thing that I go back to. Everyone predicted that once COVID hit, real estate would shut down. It would be totally crap. And the absolute opposite happened. If anyone can predict that outcome, I think that's where everyone's been put off by predictive analytics.
Well, if you listen to the media, it was 30% drop in prices, 15% unemployment rate, and we actually got a boom. So it was a bizarre thing to witness, right?
Anomaly, right? It's when no one was like, oh, this market will boom and do really well. It's like, no, did not. I did not think that would happen.
As a business owner, I feel it's kind of incumbent on me to have, my tentacles out into the world looking at like what's happening in the AI space. And then, you hear about something interesting and you do a trial and you're like, oh gosh, so close, but it's not there yet. But these AI boffins love to sort of go back to this phrase where they say, it'll never be as bad as it is today, as if to sort of say, okay, well, if you don't feel like it's good enough to do that job today, just wait. Like all you need to do is wait because everything is going to get better. So given that I've got, a tech boffin captive at least for another couple more minutes, I'm interested in your sort of crystal ball of how do you see data and data technology changing property decision making over the next 5 to 10?
Oh, there is huge scope, in my opinion. And I say that because of agentic AI as well. So part of the thing that we're working on, like with Abodey, is, okay, let's say I'm in a given suburb, right, and I'm traveling in my car and I drive past, a certain suburb that I didn't even think was in my ballpark, but I get a ping on my phone from Abodey that says, hey, your client's looking in this area, or hey, you're a customer, you've been looking at properties in this budget within this location, I've just found one that's just come on market, do you want to contact the agent? Here are some data points and a report. We're going to get to a point where the data and the information is just going to be pinged to you. It's available, almost like virtual reality, but it's actual reality, that if you have your location settings on, you're going to get this information always given to you. You're going to be over consumed with information. You're going to be sick of it to the point where you're going to revert back to people and you're going to revert back to professionals. That's how I kind of see it working. And the way you get data and analytics through to these consumers in a better way is through the professionals. So because people will revert back to that, in my opinion. So as a business owner, I'm always looking at, okay, I can give a whole bunch of data to a buyer. That buyer will understand it. They will be overwhelmed by it. It might be too consuming. They will end up down the path of either an advocate or buying an investment for the sake of buying an investment because they're sick of being on market. No matter what the data says, they'll do their best prediction and their best shot at doing it themselves. And that's totally okay. Some people win the lottery there and they do really well because they've switched on. That's how their brain works. And then some people just perform really poorly. I think everyone reverts back to what they know, and that's people. And going back to just, I need a person to do this work and I need a person to interpret it on my behalf and tell me what I'm doing is right or wrong. And agentic AI is going to change a lot of that too, because agentic AI is interesting. It's the concept is, or it already exists, but it's going to be the next phase of AI. Instead of you having to input a prompt into ChatGPT, you're going to have your own personal ChatGPT that knows you and your computer as a person, that it will just predict and do things for you on your behalf, like a PA. So it's like, hey, Joe, scheduled that meeting for you based on an email you got an hour ago, but I was having lunch with my friend. And I'm like, crap, I already got a meeting scheduled. I didn't even know.
And it knows you hate that person, so it sort of said, I'm a bit too busy to catch up. And you're like, yes.
Correct. Exactly right. It's like it's done all the heavy lifting, and we're going to get to that point where, now this AI is just working for you while you're not working, and you're going to be in this point of, do I want notifications on or off? Do I want it to do that work or not? And you're going to have to really structure that AI to work a certain way. I almost see that we're going to have BA, virtual BAs at some point through agentic AI. It's going to be like your own buying assistant. You can upload what your goals are. This AI is going to be trained a certain way to be your buyer's agent and do what it needs to do to guide you through the market at a much lower rate than what a buyer's advocate would charge. Now, whether someone is going to trust that bot to do that job and agentic AI to carry you through the entire DIY home buying process, I have no idea if people are going to trust that. I don't see that being a big uptake, but I see it being a big uptake for professionals who want to streamline their work and serve more customers more efficiently.
Yeah, well, I suppose I'm glad to hear you say that, because maybe I'm a little bit sort of optimistic about the necessity of humans to exist in the world. But it sort of sounds to be like it won't be humans versus AI. It'll be AI augmented humans versus like AI Luddite humans.
I've always seen, like, as much as I love AI and I'm in the business of, how can I put this tech in place and do some really cool stuff, I still go back to people, right? Because people built this machine. People built this Frankenstein that is AI, and now it's alive and it's doing things, and everyone's like a bit like, oh no, what's it going to do? It's unpredictable. There's a lot of scary parts to it. There's also not a lot of laws that restrict a lot of these AIs. Like, we're going to see a lot of laws come into place that restrict how AI is used. We're in the wild west of it right now. Like, if you go on social media on your reels at the moment, you don't know what you're looking at, if that's AI, if that's real, if that's fake. And it's deterring a lot of people from, what they're consuming. And I think we're going to see a lot of people that go the opposite. We're going to start being really connected as people again. I don't want to meet you online. I don't actually know if you're a person anymore, if you've just cloned yourself to be in this meeting and talk like you, to do a whole sales pitch, and I've just spoken to a bot for 30 minutes, and then you're actually not on this call at all. Like, that's another way that I'm seeing people are going to have that hesitation of, I actually need to come and meet with you. Can we have a coffee at your local coffee shop? I'll come to you.
Yeah.
And that social connection is bigger than ever. So as much as I see AI taking over in a lot of settings, and I see it being a tool that can be used properly, until we have proper laws that come in place, that people then start to have a bit more trust in the models, and people have more trust in how it's working and operating to protect us, it's going to be this massive level of distrust. I think people are always going to exist, and we're going to end up the opposite. Not that AI will ever go out of fashion.
What a time! What a time to be alive.
It's insane. If I think about I think our generation has seen a lot of change in terms of tech. Like, we've come from eras of no phones, brick phones, and Motorola's, and Razor phones, and like Snake on your phone, and then you've got floppy disks. Like, we've seen every transition of what tech is going to do. When the internet came out in 2000, we all thought that everything was going to break at midnight, and that didn't happen.
Yeah.
So it's like we've seen a lot of change, and a lot of this stuff always comes out to scare us. And I think that in the future, I'm curious what's going to come after AI. I always think about what's the next thing, because when mobile apps came out, I was blown away by mobile apps. I was like, wow, that's such a different way to use your phone. I can't imagine how we used to go through menu bars on our Nokias, like to get to games or to get to functions. And now we've got apps. That's so cool. It's a huge business. What's after apps? And then AI came in. And I'm like, oh, crap, what's after AI? I'm so worried for what we're going to do next as humans. We're an incredible force. So...
Well, Jo, I think we're going to have to get you back in 10 and 20 and maybe 50 years, or perhaps 1,000 years, where my bot's talking to your bot and we still somehow exist in some coded version.
That's right. I'll just be actually not at my computer. We'll just do this whole episode as AI clones, and it'll be really good.
Well, I can assure the listeners that we're both real, but I mean, how can you even trust what we're saying? It's a moot point. But Jo, if people are thinking, look, gosh, there's a lot of information there. It's 2026. I am going to get my portfolio started, or I want to try and build out a few more properties, or I want to make sure that I'm optimizing what I'm doing. What's your best advice, and how can they see more of what you're putting out into the world?
Oh, look, if anyone out there, like, you're sitting in that position of you want to buy, or you're not sure where you want to start, you've got to get clear and ask yourself those questions on why do you want to start? What is it? Is this to aid your retirement? Is this to have a future for family, for kids? You've got to look at your goals. Like, where do you want to be? Where do you see yourself? Always start at your goals, and then your strategy kind of comes from that goal. But you've got to get clear and ask yourself those questions on, well, what are you buying? Why are you buying? And what is it going to look like for you in 5 to 10 years? Is this a cash flow, motivation? Is this a future occupancy situation? So get really clear on what you want property to do for you before you start investing in it. When you've got that goal in mind and it's clear, then you can even ask an opinion from an advocate. You don't have to work with them necessarily, but talk to someone, not the uncle at the barbecue or the auntie at the barbecue. talk to a professional. A lot of advocates give a lot of information out. They're happy to chat, even just to guide you. If you don't want to use their service, like I'm always saying, anyone who's going, before you invest, just give me a call. If you want an opinion, You don't have to use me, you don't have to work with me. I'm cool with that, but I don't want you to make a mistake. So just ask for an opinion and maybe get 2 or 3 opinions so you know if it all stacks up, and
Awesome.
just do the research first.
And eat those veggies.
Eat those veggies. Don't start with the dessert.
As fun as it might sound. Jo, thank you very much for sharing all of that wisdom today. There's a lot for people to go to, and I'm sure that heaps of people get lots of value, and I encourage them to share it with their network as well, because there's too much at stake when we're talking about investing in our financial future. The difference between someone who has mediocre results to someone who's outperforming, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially. So thank you very much for sharing all of that with us today.
No, thank you so much for having me, Mike. Great to be here, and hopefully I provided some value to your listeners.
Absolutely. We'll see you again soon. Cheers, Jo.